Okay. Welcome, everyone, to Fundamentals of Kabbalah and Chassidut. We are continuing our series on the life and teachings of the Baal Shem Tov. Tonight, in honor, many of you were here on Sunday. I dedicated the class to a very, very good friend of mine, Rabbi Henach Hoffman, Henach ben Tzvi Hirsch. And when I was preparing the class tonight, the subject material is very, very much how he would teach. We're going to learn two different Torahs of the Baal Shem tonight. If we have time, we'll do more, but I have a feeling we'll just get to these two. These are very, very complex, deep, profound, bordering on controversial kind of ideas from the Baal Shem Tov. And so I'm going to present them and many, many different possibilities of understanding them. I'm not really proposing one particular way to understand these, but more the kind of questions that it opens up. And it takes almost a paradigm shift to really, really integrate and understand these two Torahs. So we're going to begin on Pei Tet. For those who are following, Pei Tet. So this first one is actually a very well-known teaching of the Baal Shem Tov. This happens to be one of the core sources for this idea. And he says like this, She'im nizdamen la'adam shero'eh devar avera o shemal al echad. If a person sees someone else doing something wrong, or he hears about someone doing something wrong, Yavchin sheyesh bo shemetz avera zu, v'shergish l'taken et atzmo. The Baal Shem Tov says that if you see someone doing something wrong, you hear about it, it's like a red flag. It's alerting that because you saw it and you heard it, you must have some connection to this wrongdoing that is happening. And therefore, one should look deep inside and try to fix whatever that is. Now, this is we're talking about very subtle planes. Let's say, I'll even say the Baal Shem Tov. Let's say the Baal Shem Tov heard that a certain person committed adultery. So we don't expect in a million years that the Baal Shem Tov would look at himself and think, oh, I must have committed adultery. But it's saying that on some subtle level, maybe it was something that the Baal Shem said at one point that wasn't 100% correct. Maybe it was a thought, a desirous thought that he had. And so therefore, he hears about someone committing adultery. The story where I learned the story behind this is that one time the Baal Shem Tov was coming home from shul on Shabbat evening. And after having a beautiful davening and looking forward to getting home and making kiddush and being with friends and students and family, he sees two Jews are fighting. They're like yelling at each other and like saying really terrible things about each other. And the Baal Shem Tov, the first thing he thinks is, what did I do wrong that I have to see this on Shabbat? In other words, this is how, even though it's just a few words here, but the Baal Shem Tov is giving over an idea that nothing happens in the world by what we'll call coincidence. Nothing happens that is not some kind of a message to us. And therefore, before we, let's say, hear that someone did something terrible, before we start thinking, oh, that person is rotten, he's terrible, whatever, the first thing the Baal Shem Tov says, look inside yourself and see, why did you have to hear this? Why did you have to see this? So this is self-reflexive. And as I said before, it would truly take a paradigm shift in how we look at the world, how we look at what happens to us, and for what reason it's happening. I'm going to continue reading here. So he says, V'yamar pasuk tachboshet lezeh shenitzor lishoni lishono mira. Here he's quoting, I'll continue. Sur me'ra v'yaseh tov. Bakei shalom v'radfehu. He's quoting two verses in the 34th Psalm, verses 14 and 15, where it says, Nitzor l'shoncha me'ra usfatecha midaber mirma. A person should guard their tongue from evil speech and their lips from saying deceitful things. And then it continues with a very well-known verse, Sur me'ra v'yaseh tov bakei shalom v'radfehu. Turn from evil and do good, seek out peace and pursue it. So here, the Baal Shem Tov brings in these two verses in order to say the following. Af al pi shehu kasheh lifrosh. He said, even though it's very difficult for a person not to say any lashon hara or anything resembling lashon hara, evil speech that is negative, that does not necessarily need to be said, but human beings are human beings, and we talk about other people. We make judgments on other people. So here the verse in Psalms is saying, guard your tongue from speaking evil. So the Baal Shem continues and says, Ukamosh amru b'shas v'kulam ba'avak lashon hara. And like it says in the Talmud, that there's what's called evil speech, and there's what's called avak lashon hara, which literally means the dust of lashon hara, meaning it's not like blatant, but there's a little hint to it in what we're saying. So he says that nevertheless, Natana Pasuk to kanaliza, but this verse is coming to teach us there's a way to fix this. Sheyada shehu natan lo lirod kedei she yisor atzmo mira. So in other words, the Baal Shem is saying, so why did I have to see this? Why did I have to hear this? Because in the bigger picture of thought, speech, or action from today, yesterday, a year ago, 10 years ago, a lifetime ago, there's something for me to fix about what I'm seeing or hearing. again, the paradigm shift is before I just start making judgment on other people's, and I'm going to say something not good, I'm going to give rebuke. Baal Shem says, first look inside yourself as to what message are you being sent here? What is the sign for you? And he says, when you do this, then a person can turn away from evil and do good. ואז גם הרשע יחזור בתשובה אחר שיכלול אותו עמו על ידי אחדות שכולם אדם אחד. Now the Baal Shem is saying another really startling idea. He's saying if you do this, instead of immediately judging this other person, and you look within yourself, Baal Shem says what will happen is that will help cause this person to do tshuva. You didn't say anything to them, but just your own thought process is going to have an effect on the person who's doing wrong. And because you are including him within yourself, because you're looking at yourself, what possibly have I done wrong that is somehow connected to what I'm seeing or hearing? And so we're including this person within our own desire to fix ourselves. And through this, we create a unity where we understand that we're all really one neshama. Another incredible idea from the Baal Shem Tov. It's, okay, I see this person doing that and that person is doing that. And I could easily say, what does it have to do with me? But the Baal Shem is saying, ultimately, we're all part of the same soul energy. So if I try to fix myself, by extension, it will have an effect on the person who's doing wrong. That's what the verse says. Turn from evil and do good. Pursue peace. Run after peace and pursue it. So the Baal Shem is saying, by this thought process that he's proposing here, that is what it means to run after peace. Now, afterwards, or as part of this process, a person can turn to the other person and try to help them get beyond whatever they're doing not correctly or wrong. It doesn't preclude that. It doesn't preclude taking an active role in trying to help fix the other person through speech or through action. But here the Baal Shem says, first you start with an inner thought. These are very deep and profound ideas. I would imagine most people would have a very difficult time seeing the world like this all the time. But just knowing this Torah from the Baal Shem Tov, who knows when it can come to our aid and make a difference. So here I want to tell a few ideas that go along with this. So one is one of the Chabad Rebbes who used to, like all of them, would receive people for consultation. And people would come to the Rebbe and they pour out their hearts about their material condition, their spiritual condition, ask for advice, reveal things that probably no one knew. And sometimes the Rebbe's, there would be literally a line outside the door, people waiting their turn to get in. And the assistant to the Rebbe noticed that when he would finish the evening, he'd be soaked in sweat. And so once he asked the Rebbe, and we're talking about maybe in the winter, where on a physical level, he couldn't understand why is the Rebbe sweating so profusely. So the Rebbe told him like this. He said, when someone comes in and asks for advice and reveals all kinds of things, many times things that they've done wrong and want to learn how to do better. So the Rebbe said, for me to really help this person, I have to take off my clothes and step into their clothes. Or like the saying says, step into their shoes. And then after I can really identify with what they're going through, then I have to put back on my clothes and do my best to help them. So he said, when I see 30 or 40 people in an evening changing clothes 40 times, that's why I sweat so much. So here, it's not exactly what we're talking about, but it's a similar idea. Someone comes into, let's say, a therapist, comes into a good friend, a counselor, a Rebbe, a Rebbitzin, whatever it is, and they're pouring out their heart, and in many times, like revealing things that they have never revealed before. On one hand, you can imagine that there's a lot of judgment going on, that whoever is the counselor, Rebbe, Rebbitzin, etc., is looking at this person. Oh my gosh, they did this, they did that. Okay, I need to help them. But here, the Rebbe is saying, I can only help them if I can, as it were, get inside their skin and truly understand what is motivating them, what their problem is, what their deficiency is. And unless I can do that, I can't really help them, because I would just be passing judgment. I'm giving advice, but the advice is coming from, we'll call it a very one-dimensional kind of play by the book kind of advice. Another story, it might be about the same Rebbe. I don't remember which of the Chabad Rebbes this is talking about. It could be the Midler Rebbe, or it could be the Rebbe Rashab. A similar story is someone came in, no one knows what happened between them. And after he left, he told his assistant, I can't be bothered. He shut the door, and he was in there for like hours and hours and hours and hours. And the Rebbe, the assistant, couldn't imagine what's going on here. So afterwards, he finally comes out, and the assistant asked, Rebbe, what happened? And he said that he, in the course of meeting this person, the problem that was presented, at first he couldn't find anything within himself that he could relate to this situation. And he felt like there must be something deficient in myself that I can't even find a way to relate to this. And he said, so I had to delve very deeply in myself for hours until I could find something in myself that I could relate to this person in order to help them. So these are stories that go along with this teaching of the Baal Shem Tov. But there are many questions here. There are many questions about how life unfolds. In other words, when things happen to us, where is the line between free will and God sending us messages, or our interpreting everything that's happening around us from we'll even call it an egocentric point of view. And here, usually we use the word egocentric as something negative. But here I just mean that every person looks at the world through their eyes. And so things happen to us 24/7. The question is, how do we interpret everything? Is everything a sign from heaven for me? I see something good, I see something bad, I see something challenging. How do we interpret everything that's happening? It's clear from many teachings from the Baal Shem Tov, he was a firm believer in divine providence as being all inclusive, that everything that is happening is part of God's rulership of the world and God's influence in each and every person's life. In that sense, everything that does happen to us can be taken as a sign, something to learn from. It even says in Pirkei Avot, Eza Chacham, who is the wise one? Halomed mikol adam, someone who learns from every person. Now, if we just extend that, it's not just learning from every person. Now, that's a very, very high level, because so many of our encounters in the world, we don't really know what do we have to learn from what this person is doing or saying or acting. And again, we look at the world through our perspective. And here the Baal Shem Tov is saying everything has meaning, everything is a sign, everything is part of God's providence, and that's how we should interpret the world around us. You have to be on a very, very high level to do this on a constant basis. But nonetheless, just knowing this and letting it seep in, we could see at certain times it could be so helpful. Instead of running to judge others, that we first try to understand, what am I being taught by this situation? Now, this goes along very well with what we've been learning the last few weeks. And I know already next week, we're going to go back to it. This whole idea of how do you turn what's called evil into good, or negative into positive? How do you turn gevura into chesed? Because every day we're challenged with all kinds of obstacles and trials and questions and tribulations. And it's so easy to fall into a negative headspace. Well, how do you look at what's happening, each person to themselves, in order to find the good in it, the chesed in it? So that's very connected to this Torah here, that instead of the Baal Shem's walking home from shul, he sees two people fighting, and either it's like it doesn't even register. What do I care? Like I'm going home to make kiddush. What do I care that they're arguing? Or it could be the opposite. It could bother us so much that we intervene. We might yell at them for yelling at each other. But here the Baal Shem was bringing it inside. Now this is very interesting, because on Rosh Hashanah, one of the first things we do, we say the evening prayers, we come back and we have our meal, we say Kiddush, Hamotzi, and then we eat the special foods. They're called simanim. They're called signs. And we learn from the Gemara that they're discussing exactly what the Baal Shem is talking about. If you see different things, this is where a lot of superstition comes from. If you see something, how much do you attach to it? And so many superstitions are, if you see a black cat running in front of you, it means X. Or if you see a shooting star, it means Y. Or if you walk under a ladder, it means this. So there's a whole discussion in the Gemara about what are signs that we should take seriously or try to learn from, and what is superstition and we should not pay attention to it. So part of the discussion is that signs are meaningful. There is such a thing as auspicious signs. So that's how we start Rosh Hashanah. We take an apple and we dip it in honey, and we say, "May this be a sweet year." We take a pomegranate, and we say that our merits should be multiplied like the seeds of a pomegranate. You see, take the head of a fish. Say we should be like the head and not the tail. So one of the things we're learning right in the beginning of the year, all of these things are common, mundane things: an apple, a pomegranate, a fish, a bean. Like, why would we put tremendous meaning into these things? But actually, we're being taught in a certain way, everything has meaning. Everything has something to teach us. And that's how we start the year. They're called auspicious signs. Simanei Milta, auspicious signs. So there's a lot to think about here. There's really, really a lot to think about. And one final thing before we move on is we could also just contemplate, is what I'm seeing, if it's meant for me to see it, is in a like a circular way, is it happening because I need to see it? Or it's happening and I see it and I learn from it? I'm not sure if I made myself clear. It's like a chicken and an egg. What is causing what? And this just reminds me in 2 parshas ago, when Pharaoh has a dream and he tells his astrologers, no one can interpret it for him. And so his butler says, when I was in jail, there was this Hebrew slave and I had a dream and he interpreted it exactly how he interpreted. That's what happened. So Pharaoh calls for him, tells him his dream. Yosef interprets the dream. So if you look at a cause and effect, the cause of Yosef coming out of jail was because Pharaoh had a dream and needed it interpreted. But the Ishbitzer, we learned this a few weeks ago, the Ishbitzer turns it upside down and says that, why did Pharaoh dream? Because Yosef had just gotten to the end. He's been in jail for 12 years. And it's, according to tradition, it's on Rosh Hashanah. And Yosef finally cries out to God, I can't take it anymore. I've been waiting 12 years and accepting that you know best. I'm here for a reason, but I'm at the end here. So the Ishbitzer says, as soon as he had that thought, Pharaoh has his dream. In other words, now it's time for Yosef to come out of jail. That's why Pharaoh dreamed. So if we take that to our situation here, is what happens around us, we could just take it as it's happening. It's because of other people's geschäft, their free will, their fate, their destiny. I'm seeing it, so I have to learn something from it. Or is it possible that I need to learn something, and that has a tremendous effect on other people that they don't even know? and therefore something happens to them, and it's really because of me. I'm just posing this as a possibility. Obviously, it seems clearer that things happen in the world, and if I see it, it's my divine providence or God's divine providence, and I need to learn from this. But on a deep level, sometimes it could actually be the opposite, that our thought process is creating the reality around us. And if we delve into quantum physics and the role of consciousness in reality, then what I'm saying is not far-fetched at all. Now we're going to go to Ayin Hey, Torah Ayin Hey. And this is like a sister Torah to the one we just learned. Says like this. I'm not trying to read every word just because of time here. So here the subject is Ech yitpalel al sono. How should a person pray about their enemies? Now here we could be talking about a personal enemy. We could talk on the level of all of Israel, a national enemy. It could be not an enemy in the type of enemy that they want to kill us or something. Just someone who is difficult for us, is causing us problems. So we're going to use the word enemy like very broadly. It could be really an enemy, or it could just be someone who's like giving us a hard time, doesn't like us and makes it known, talks about us, whatever. So then he says, there's a verse that says 7 times that tzaddik falls and gets up. Rotzelamar, b'zayin sfirot nitgalgel nefesh ruach neshama shalom. So here he says, and he doesn't really expand on this. This is between the lines. But he says, that is to say, that within each of the 7 lower sfirot, that a person's nefesh, ruach, and neshama are found there. I'll explain as we go forward. That's actually because he doesn't develop that. I'm going to put that to the side. But here what he says, Dayinu nefesh hem avadimu behemot shalom. What he's going to say now is like this, that a person's nefesh, sometimes translated as one's animal soul, the intuitive, instinctual part of the soul that's inherently connected to the body. This is where our desires come from, our passions, our physical needs are connected to the nefesh. So he says that a person's nefesh is connected to their, here he says servants or animals, but it could also be their workers, people that they come across doing jobs for them. In other words, our nefesh is connected to physical objects and people around us. Ruach hu ishto, and one's spirit is connected to their wife or husband. And this can also mean their family, relatives. Dibur hu gamkein zivug shepeh shenikra ishto. And also one's speech is very connected to one's wife and family. Zachar ezer lo zachar kenegdo. Like it says in the Torah, it says that God created a woman to be an ezer kenegdo, to be a helpmeet for a man. When God separated Adam and Chava, So it says that the woman was created to be a helpmeet. So the Gemara says that if he is on a proper level, she will be a helpmate. But if he's not, she will be against him. So, but what the Baal Shem is trying to say is that our words are going to affect our relationships. Our nefesh is going to relate to the physical world, our possessions, our animals, those who work for us. Our ruach is connected to our spouse. And then he says, "V'naseh mimenu anashim sonav hamadabrim alav." So in other words, if someone doesn't use their speech properly to their spouse, to their family, to their workers, it's going to cause someone to speak out against them. Now, we might never see the cause and effect directly, but it's like we put into the air, we put into reality. If our speech is off, the Baal Shem is saying, expect someone to speak out against you, to say lashon hara about you. And then he says, "Upagam shebemoach b'machshava gorem sheyesh lo tsar mibanav." And he says, when there's a blemish in our thought process, it will come out in problems from our children. And again, here we're talking on such a subtle level because sometimes we can see a direct corollary between, we have, let's say, a negative thought, and it comes back, something comes back against us, and we could figure out it must be because I'm thinking so negatively, this negative energy is coming back, or I'm speaking negative about other people. Now other people are speaking negatively about me. Or if my actions are not proper, then I might expect someone's actions against me to be problematic. Okay, so I'm just saying because of the lack of time, I see I can't really get into every word here. But this is the thought. Let's just concentrate on this. That our thought, speech, and action is going to affect other people's thoughts, speech, and action towards us. It's very, very simple. So in other words, what the Baal Shem is saying, and he continues to say, he says like this, that because of all of this, in a certain way, we are creating our own enemies. That's the bottom line of what the Baal Shem Tov is saying here. That we are instrumental in creating our own enemies. Now, here we have to say something that we have to be very, very careful with this concept here. Very, very careful, because if we misunderstand it, then we'll take Israel for an example. Israel, for 2,000 years, has been oppressed and driven and kicked out and slaughtered, you name it. And in the last 75 years, we have fought war after war after war after war. Everyone knows we're in the midst of a 7-front war right now. And so if we just take this very superficially, we could say it's all because of us. We're responsible for the whole thing. that becomes somewhat dangerous, because that takes the responsibility off of others who are doing terrible things as if they have no part of it. And that, of course, is an impossible position to take. It's as if saying the whole Holocaust was because of us. It had nothing to do with the Nazis or Yamach Shemo. Now that's untenable. But then we have to get into the subtleties here. And we know from the Torah, this is one of the themes of the Torah in general, and specifically the book of Devarim, Deuteronomy. And for those who have been learning the book of Judges, it is part and parcel of the whole book of Judges, is that God established a covenant with the Jewish people, and it has rules to it. And the rules are, if you follow the mitzvot, you listen to God, you live a moral, ethical life, you create a moral, ethical society, everything will be good. And if you turn away from God and you worship idols and you don't do the mitzvot and you don't create a moral, ethical society, then your enemies will come against you. You will not be able to stay in the land. You will go into exile. And that is true on a certain level. But what about the responsibility for all of our enemies? Have they no responsibility? We're creating the whole thing ourselves. So here we have to look and understand that in a certain way, part of both of those statements are true. So listen what the Baal Shem Tov says. So he says, so if there is a blemish in one's speech, so if one is careless with their speech, you can fix it through a positive type of speech that comes through prayer. So here he's now talking about how to deal with enemies. That's what he started here. So his basic premise here is that if you have an enemy, personal enemy, Israel has an enemy, and again, an enemy could mean someone who's out to kill you, or just someone who doesn't like you, giving you a hard time, talking against you, acting against you, but not to the point of destroying you. So the Baal Shem is saying, well, what do you do with that? So here he gives a formula. He said that going with the first Torah that we learned, that in a certain way, we have to take a certain amount of responsibility for the existence of our enemies. It's not a full responsibility because they have free will, they have their own fate and destiny, and they have their own accounting to do with God. And these are accountings that only God knows. But the Baal Shem Tov says that a person should pray that their enemy turns from evil to good. That's what he says. That, of course, we have to defend ourselves against someone who's attacking us physically, or even trying to ruin our reputation or saying things about us. A person has the right to defend themselves. But the Baal Shem Tov is saying, along with that, we should be praying that the person changes. And this is a famous story in the Gemara of Rabbi Meir and his wife, Bruria. And in their neighborhood, the whole neighborhood was being terrorized by thieves. And they were like ruling the neighborhood. No one felt safe. Everyone was getting ripped off. And the people came to Rabbi Meir and said, pray that these people are destroyed. And Beruria hears this, and he says to her husband, we should pray that their sins will cease, not that they will die, but they'll stop doing sins. And so Rebbe Meir did that. He prayed that these people did tshuva, that they would change, and they did. It's a well-known story in the Gemara. And the principle is to try to divide between the core person and the acts that they're doing. We could be very against a person's actions without hating the person, without giving them a chance to change, without really not seeing the image of God within this person. Obviously, the person's having a hard time and they're doing not good things. Of course, we don't have to just roll over and just accept it. But the Baal Shem Tov is saying, what about praying for them that they'll change? So then he says another thing. He says that, and this I have to bring up here now, because I think we've talked about this before. There is a book by Sarah Yehudit Schneider called You Are What You Hate. It's a very thick book, and it's based on really one fairly short Torah from the Kamarner Rebbe, who takes the Torah that we're learning right now, and he expands on it. And he expands. It's a tremendous book. And as I said in the beginning, these ideas need paradigm shifts. We're very used to, if we have someone who's giving us a problem, like we want to wipe them out. We want to destroy them. And same thing with Israel. And here, the added part is, and the Baal Shem says this in this Torah, the Torah from the Kamarner is just an expansion of this Torah we're learning right now. The Baal Shem Tov says like this, really an amazing thing. He says that we should pray that our enemies do tshuva. We should, as like I said, we have the right to defend ourselves, and we don't have to be a doormat. But we should really pray that they do tshuva. And he says that almost every evil has a little good in it. Has a little good in it. And what we're trying to do is to ignite that good. That's like in the first Torah we learned that when we pray for other people, that it actually, we may not see it like a direct connection, but it will help them do tshuva, because we're not pushing them completely away. We just don't want them doing these not good things. But the Baal Shem says that there are evil people that there really isn't any good there. And so if we pray that they will do tshuva, either it will help them do tshuva, or it will destroy them. So this is like, whoa. The same prayer, I'm praying that someone does tshuva, but if they're truly evil, that my prayer for them to do good, but if there's no good there, it will actually help to destroy them. It's almost counterintuitive, but that's what the Baal Shem Tov says. So therefore he says, so it's worth it, because if there's a little good there, then we might help ignite it. Rabbi Nachman, the Baal Shem Tov's great-grandson, he took this idea and it became a major platform. And in fact, in his life, it was already the time of the Enlightenment. We're talking about the early 1800s. And there were many Jews leaving the fold at that point, that some of the ghetto walls had come down, not everywhere, that's for sure, but the Enlightenment was having an effect on the Jewish people. And Rabbi Nachman, even then, 200 years ago, we'll call it kiruv. He wouldn't, like, here's people who aren't doing mitzvahs anymore, who are flaunting the Torah. So you would think, like, just get out of my face, go away. The Baal Shem, the Rabbi Nachman made a big effort to try to bring them back, because he believed that they're not evil people. Maybe they're not doing good, but they have good in them. And so I need to try to connect to that good, awaken that good. And that is a principle of all what we'll call kiruv, is reaching out to every Jew. And with Rav Ginsburg's idea of it's time to teach the whole world Torah, reaching out to the whole world and trying to recognize the point of good in every person, and to pray that our enemies will do tshuva. It's not unheard of, it's not impossible. But again, almost counterintuitively, if there really isn't any goodness there, we'll call it Amalek energy. If it's a type of Amalek energy, then the same prayer that they will do tshuva will actually destroy them, because there's no good there. And that prayer will help to destroy them. So I want to just take this idea. It's definitely getting late. And I want to say again that we have to be very careful with this, because in a certain way, this would be like the epitome of what they call Jewish guilt. No matter what happens to us, it's all our fault. We've created all of our enemies. That is, like I said, untenable. But at the same time, we have to take responsibility for what is happening around us. And I'm going to connect this very, very much to what's happening now. Here in Israel, everyone knows October 7th and the almost 15 months since then, what we've gone through. Now, if we look at, well, why did this happen? How is this brought down upon us? So there's really two ways we can look at it, and each one has a point of truth to it. One is, it's now known that Hamas was planning this for years. For years. That's why they spent nearly 15 years building this tunnel city and taking all the money coming into Gaza and putting it not into the people, but in preparation for war. And so it wasn't like all of a sudden, October 7th, we were attacked by our enemies. They are truly Amalek energy. I'm not saying all the people of Gaza, and I'm not saying all Arabs, and I'm not saying all Palestinians, but those of who are leading the wars against us, they are Amalek energy. And so they have their own cheshbon with God, their own accounting with God. And unfortunately, evil people also have free will. And so they did what they did, and that's why we're in a war situation. But everyone in Israel It's been talked about for almost since day one. If we remember that before October 7th, there was terrible dissension in Israel, the worst it ever was, at least for the modern state of Israel. And there was talk of civil war. The demonstrations were getting more and more violent. The political speech was toxic. It was really a very bad scene here. And on that Yom Kippur, and people pointed this out even before October 7th, there was Yom Kippur services in Dizengoff Square. And because there was a semblance of a mechitza, that certain people came in and tried to break up Yom Kippur prayers. And everyone commented like, whoa, what have we come to? What have we come to? And then 10 days later was October 7th. And so everyone comments like somehow that also helped bring this down upon us. And I'll say again, we have to be very careful with this, very careful, because if you put the whole blame on us, it's unrealistic and it's not true. But at the same time, we have to understand that we play a part in creating our enemies. And I feel a little bit bad that I didn't leave enough time to go through word for word in this paragraph, but I definitely gave over the basic idea from the Baal Shem Tov, that we have a part in creating our enemies. Our thought, our speech, and our action helps create our enemies. But on the other hand, the Baal Shem says we should pray that they do tshuva, and if not, they will be destroyed. So it's like trying to understand both sides of this. And if you look at the book of Devarim, and if you look at the prophets say it over and over again. If you continue in your not so good ways, the temple is going to be destroyed. You're going to be sent to exile. And the language is that God is going to do it. And here it's very, very subtle. Does it mean God is doing it, or we're actually doing it to ourselves, measure for measure? And the truth is, it's a little of both. It's a little of both. And the prophets also come and say, even in exile, even when Israel is being punished for their sins, God says, I will never abandon Israel, and promises to bring them back to Eretz Yisrael and redemption and all of that. So everything we spoke about tonight needs a lot of thought. And what the Baal Shem is trying to get through to us is that we can't avoid the idea that we're somehow responsible for the situation we're in. I just want to tell a story. One of the leaders of the Breslov community, this is going back 45 years ago, was Reb Gedalia Koenig, who passed away. And his son then became the leader of the Breslov community in Sfat, that many people have visited. And he was an incredible person. And he loved Baal Tshuvas. He loved people coming back to the fold. So one time he came to our Moshav to speak with us. And it was a tremendous honor that he came. And that very day, I don't remember all the details. It was in the late 70s. A bus that was coming from, I think, Haifa to Tel Aviv was hijacked by terrorists. They took over the bus, just like later, they would take over airplanes. And there was an attempt to save the people. It was a terrible scene. Like, I think 34 Jews died in the battle over this bus. And it just happened. And Reb Gedaliah Kennan came and he taught, and someone asked, Rebbe, how do we understand things like this happening? What do we make from it? And I remember he thought for a short time, and all he said is, if we were doing everything that we need to be doing correctly, things like this would not happen. I'll never forget that. And many people say that. Many people say, and it's in the Torah, but as I've said 3 or 4 times tonight, there's a limit to where you can go with that. And if it all comes back on us, then it eliminates it. There's a whole other side of reality. But the point is that the Baal Shem is making in both of the Torahs that we learned tonight is that we help create the reality around us, our thoughts, our speech, and our action. And they affect our possessions. They affect our spouses, our children, our neighbors, our friends, our strangers. Our thoughts, speech, and action affect what's happening, and that we have to learn from everything. I remember, and I think everyone knows this, the first 3 or 4 months of the war here, everyone was saying, we have to get together. That this division in the people is causing terrible things. There was almost a universal understanding. Everyone understood that Hamas has been our enemy for all these years, and fanatic Islam in Iran. We know all of that. But people recognized, in a very painful way, is we needed a wake-up call. Now, we could either say that God helped engineer this. I don't like saying that, but I do accept that we were heading towards disaster, and in a way that Hamas didn't expect. They didn't expect this to help bring us back together. They thought this is a perfect time because they're at each other's throats. This is the time to strike them. They had a different agenda altogether, but the result was a recognizing that somehow this division in the people had brought this catastrophe down on us. As I said in the beginning, I'm not proposing any real total answers here, but it is something for us to think about. And we need to do what we need to do. That's from the time that the Torah was given. This is the message that God is trying to tell us, is that we need to follow the Torah, be good people, be moral and ethical, do the mitzvot, believe in God, and everything will be good. And when we're not doing that, then the Torah makes it very, very clear that not good things are going to happen. Where exactly we're going to place the exact blame and which percentages of where it's coming from, that only God knows. But we need to take responsibility. And so I'll end with a blessing that we dedicated to doing good, to being kind people, to believing in one God, and believing that redemption will come and there will be peace, and creating a moral and ethical society whose example can affect the whole world, and that we will see very, very soon a complete redemption.